On today's episode, Toughest Mudder NorCal recap with the host of the Overcome and Run podcast, Heather Bode.
This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast.
Welcome back to World's Toughest Podcast. My name is Will Hicks. Thank you for listening. You're listening to the number one rated obstacle course racing podcast in the world, according to Apple Podcasts and Amazon.com. Thank you for leaving a review for the show, wherever you are in the world. On today's show, Heather Bode of Overcome and Run. Overcome and Run has been around since January of 2016. Heather has gone from being an OCR novice, from being a newbie like all of us once were, to winning her age group at Spartan and finishing in the top 10 at Toughest Mudder races. We talk about having an OCR podcast host division at World's Toughest Mudder, and if we did that, Heather would probably win. I know she'd beat me. Before we start, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. You can send cookies to 3525 Delmar Heights Road, Box 911, San Diego, California, 92130. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheWillHicks, and you can follow the show on Instagram at World's Toughest Podcast. Let's talk about social media for a second. I have been posting more frequently on our Instagram page, World's Toughest Podcast. Not coincidentally, I have been putting out podcast episodes less frequently. Instagram is easy and fun. Editing audio is not. I think our Instagram has blossomed at the expense of our podcast. So here's what we're going to do. I am quitting the social media game. It's lots of fun, but it doesn't stick. I'm not a big Facebook guy anyway. I'm barely on Twitter. I like Twitter. I'm barely on it. And I could take or leave Instagram. It's cool. It's fun. I like the pictures. But here's the thing. I know social media is important these days. I'm not, oh, boo-hoo, woe is me, what's up with all these kids and their Instagrams. It's important. I get it. But it's not my jam, and it's not as important to me as the podcast is. So here is what we're going to do. I need some help. I need 5 or 10 guys, girls, 5 or 10 people to be my social media team. If you are interested in that, shoot me an email, willhicks@gmail.com. Here's what will happen. When a new episode of the podcast goes live, I will send you a picture or some pictures, maybe, of the guest. You listen to the episode, you write up what you think about it, or maybe something you learned from the episode, and you choose which picture you want to post on your social media channels. You're 100% in charge of it. You are I hate the term ambassador, brand ambassador. It's kind of a thing, right? But you're in charge of it. I will equip you, and I'll give you the podcast. I'll give you the pictures. Maybe I won't give you the pictures. Maybe you need to go out and find a good picture. Maybe you can find a better picture of the guest. That's cool. But every time a new episode goes live, I'll shoot you an email, and I will say, go to town, and we'll see what happens. I know what you're saying. Wow, that's a lot of work, Will. What are you going to pay us to do that? And I would say, ha! You're hilarious. You will be paid with my gratitude and a sweet World's Toughest Podcast sticker. Oh, yeah. There are very few of these bad boys out in the wild. Maybe 20, 25. You will get a sweet sticker, but beside that, what you will get is me sending my listeners to your social media channels to hear about news from World's Toughest Podcast. All the likes and the shares and the follows will be yours to keep forever, unless they unfollow you. So maybe not forever. But seriously, if you want to be on the World's Toughest Podcast social media team, shoot me an email, willhicks@gmail.com. Put social media in the subject line, and in the body, put your name, your email address, your phone number, and links to your social media channels. Show me that you're good at it, and we will talk. Maybe you're awesome at Snapchat. Okay, cool. Maybe you're all about Periscope. Awesome. Maybe you're a blockchain guy and you want to sell World's Toughest Pod coin. That's weird, but maybe. We'll talk. If you are interested in being part of the World's Toughest social media team, shoot me an email, willhicks@gmail.com. Now, let's talk Toughest Mudder West. This weekend was the 7th and final Toughest Mudder 8-hour race of the year. It was also the first and so far only Toughest Mudder held entirely during the day. Toughest Mudder usually begins at 12 midnight Saturday night, wrapping up at 8 a.m. Sunday morning. Toughest Mudder West began at 8 a.m. Sunday and finished at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. We are going to have a season wrap-up episode soon where we talk about each race in the series, and we will determine which toughest was the toughest. Today, we're going to focus on Toughest Mudder West. Your winners for the men were Christopher Mendoza. And for the women, Rhea Coble.
5 stars.
We haven't heard that in a while, have we? Christopher Mendoza. Rhea Coble.
5 stars.
Christopher Mendoza, Rhea Coble.
5 stars.
Mendoza won the men's race with 45 miles, and Coble won the women's race with 40. Your top 5 men were Christopher Mendoza with 45 miles, Trevor Sykos with 45 miles, Robert Wiltshire with 45 miles, Glenn Race with 45 miles, Austin Azar with 40 miles. Your top 5 women were Rhea Coble with 40 miles, Allison Ty with 40 miles, Michelle Ford with 35 miles, Corinne Colin with 35 miles, Deanna Brass with 35 miles. Let's talk more about the men. In first place was, you know what? Let's give it a break, guys. In first place was Chris Mendoza with 45 miles. Chris is one of the only 7 men to ever run 100 miles at World's Toughest Mudder. He finished 3rd at World's Toughest Mudder 2016. His relay team at World's Toughest Mudder 2017 ran 120 miles. And Chris is one of the few men to run 50 miles at a Toughest Mudder. That was in Michigan, although he finished 2nd in that race behind Ryan Atkins. This is Chris's first win at Toughest Mudder. In second place was Trevor Sykos with 45 miles. Like Chris, Trevor is one of 7 men to run 100 miles or more at World's Toughest Mudder. Trevor ran 105 miles on his way to a first-place finish at World's Toughest 2016. He also recently competed in the Run Across Scotland, where he literally ran the 200-plus miles across the country of Scotland. Trevor won that race. In third place was Robert Wiltshire with 45 miles. Wiltshire was my dark horse pick to finish on the podium based on his 4th place finish at Toughest Mudder South this year in Texas. The 45 miles and 3rd place finish this weekend is Wiltshire's personal best at Toughest Mudder. In 4th place was Glenn Race with 45 miles. Glenn was a member of the relay team that finished in 1st at World's Toughest Mudder 2017 and was also on the Toughest Mudder West podium last year. Glenn finished just 1 spot off the podium this year. In 5th place was Austin Azar with 40 miles. Austin, along with Trevor and Chris, is a member of the exclusive 100 Miler Club at World's Toughest Mudder. Austin finished second the year he ran 100 miles, just behind Trevor Psycho's 105 miles and just ahead of Chris Mendoza's 100 miles. Let's talk about the women. In first place was Rhea Coble with 40 miles. This was her third win at Toughest Mudder this year, tying the three wins already held by Allison Ty this year. This is Rhea's fourth win in a row, including her record-tying 90-mile performance at World's Toughest Mudder 2017. Like Ryan Atkins, Rhea has never lost a race 8 hours or longer. In second place was Allison Ty with 40 miles. This was Allison's fifth Toughest Mudder of the year, of the 7 that they've held. In those 5 races, she finished second, first, and now second. This summer, while she was in town for Toughest Mudder Australia, she stuck around a couple extra weeks and competed in the 24-hour enduro race sponsored by the OCR World Championships. And she won. In third place was Michelle Ford with 35 miles. Michelle finished on the podium last year at Toughest Mudder Whistler in second place, just ahead of Allison Ty. In fact, the women's podium at Toughest Mudder West this weekend, Rhea Coble, Allison Ty, Michelle Ford, is the exact same podium as World's Toughest Mudder 2017. Rhea, Allison, Michelle. In fourth place was Corinne Colin with 35 miles. This is Corinne's first top 5 finish at a Toughest Mudder, but she is no stranger to Tough Mudder and World's Toughest Mudder. She's run World's Toughest several times, including finishing on the very first podium at the very first World's Toughest Mudder in 2011, right behind Amelia Boone. In fifth place was Deanna Brass with 35 miles. This is the second time this year Deanna has qualified as an elite contender for World's Toughest Mudder. Deanna has mainly been known as a tougher mudder competitor in the past, but she has been steadily increasing her comfort zone and performance level in the longer, toughest mudder races. With their top 5 finishes, all 10 athletes qualify as elite contenders for World's Toughest Mudder 2018. Elite contender status grants them a reserved pit area, the best start line location, and qualifies them for the yet-to-be-announced bonus prizing at World's Toughest. Congratulations to everyone who ran, and especially to these elite contenders. So that's the elites. But what about the race? It was good. I was there. I ran it this weekend. We're going to talk about this more with Heather Bode in a minute, but it was good. It was the first daytime Toughest Mudder, and it's near the end of the year, so I got the idea or maybe the feeling that it was kind of a test run for possibly holding all the Toughest Mudders during the day in 2019, and I hope that is not the case. Daytime Tough Mudders are not better than nighttime Tough Mudders, and that's my opinion. Heather agrees with me. There's some of the elites we're going to talk to later this week. They disagree. They like the daytime better. So I'm hoping that they keep at least a mix of them. If not, don't kill the nighttime toughest mudders. To be fair to Tough Mudder, they haven't said a word about daytime toughest mudders in 2019. The only reason this race was even held was because the original Toughest Mudder West was canceled back in March down in Los Angeles or near Los Angeles. So they had to move it to another venue, and so they had to kind of scramble. So I appreciate them holding the race at all. They didn't have to. They rescheduled. It was great. I had a good time. But I'm hoping that daytime is the exception rather than the rule. The only announced toughest for 2019 so far is the UK at Beaver Castle. They're going back to the same venue for a third year in a row. And on the website, they're promoting it as 8 hours through the night. So for what that's worth. But yeah, I'd say it was a good race. The things I was worried about ended up not being an issue. And things I didn't even think about were a little bothersome. The race started at 8 a.m. and went until 4 p.m., really 4:30 with the 30-minute grace period. The regular Sunday mudders, the full half and 5K runners, they started at 9:30 And they were out on the course with us until 1:30, maybe 2 o'clock. The worry going in, the concern going in was that there would be congestion at the obstacles, but there really wasn't. The only obstacle that really had any congestion problems or even concerns was Mud Mile. And I think that's because the regular full half, 5K runners, not the 5K, but the half and the full, really just the full. Now just think about it, had to come through Mud Mile twice. The half and the 5K just went through once. But that obstacle did have some congestion on it. But everyone was super willing and cool to get out of the way. If you're like, hey, I'm racing here, or hey, can I jump ahead of you? Everyone was great at the obstacle. Because it was during the day and warm, there were no wetsuits, which was great for running. But with the warmth and with the wind, when you came out of the muddy obstacles, the mud would stick to your skin. It would harden and dry real fast, and it would make your skin ache. It's hard to explain, but after a while, your skin just kind of hurt. Not quite like a sunburn. Imagine if the insides of your body suddenly shrank, but your skin didn't. So your skin is trying to squish itself smaller toward itself. Look, I said it's hard to explain. All I know is my skin hurt in a weird way it hasn't hurt before. And it felt like that for the next day or two. We're going to talk more about the race with Heather Bode today and the men's and women's winners, Christopher Mendoza and Rhea Coble soon.
5 stars.
World's Toughest Mudder is less than 30 days away. So what shoes are you going to wear? I'm going to give away 5 pair of Merrell shoes in our next 5 episodes. 5 pairs. 5 pairs. Hey, grammar guys, is it 5 pair or 5 pairs of shoes? Let me know. willhicks@gmail.com. I'm going to give away 10 shoes, 2 at a time, over the next 5 episodes. You can win one of the pairs. Would you like to win a free pair of running shoes for World's Toughest Mudder? Shoot me a text. Text the word tough to the number 22828. That's tough to the number 22828. And you'll be subscribed to our once every email list and entered to win a pair of free Merrell Trail Running Shoes. I ran Toughest Mudder West in the All Out Crush 2.0s, the version with the shoelaces. And the next question would be, they have a version without shoelaces? And the answer is yes, they actually do. It's called the BOA lacing system. And it's pretty cool. There's a thing about the size of a nickel, and it's about as wide as a nickel. It's about as thick as, 4 nickels. How many nickels do you deal with on a day-to-day basis? Not very many. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's got a little knob you twist to tighten, and you untwist it to loosen. But here's the deal with the BOA lacing system. They run like half a size big. So if you wear a 10.5, buy a 10 in the BOA. Anyway, I ran in the All Out Crush 2.0s at Toughest Mudder West, and they were great. Those and Mud Gear socks, and I had no blisters. Today's winner of a free pair of Merrell Trail Running Shoes is Michael Goodfried. Congratulations, Michael. Look for an email from Merrell and I in the next couple days with information on how to claim your prize. Before we talk with Heather Bode, let's read some iTunes reviews.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars. 5 stars.
Our first review comes from Amazon.com. On Amazon, JH writes, 5 stars, giggle. Just listened to the Doza episode and was laughing at work hard enough that I got a dirty look from a nearby coworker. I do not care. Between his singing and then the giggle, my whole day and attitude was made better by the podcast. I should have listened to this episode sooner, though, because I totally sang to Chris each time he passed me at Toughest Midwest, except the last, which he was then disappointed by. Timeout. JH, I doubt Chris was disappointed in you. I'm sure he was happy for the encouragement he got. I'm now listening to Merrell Mutter Moments with Francis and Sue, and know this will be fantastic because they are some of the people in the Mutter family with the biggest hearts. I really enjoy listening to the podcast, especially when I don't have a race for a while. Hearing what you guys are up to keeps me positive and focused. I enjoy all the guests, from Ryan to Pissing Cox, to Survivor Warrior stories like Ian and Adrian, to even Spartan Joe. 5 stars. Giggle. And maybe a snort like I did when I got the dirty look earlier. Thank you, JH, for that review. Well done. Her giggle comment is actually referring to Chris's impersonation.
5 stars.
Which was an impersonation of Rhea.
5 stars.
Impersonating us, saying 5 stars. You know, after a while, the snake just kind of eats itself, doesn't it? Thank you, JH, for that review. Very kind. We have lots more with Chris Mendoza in the next couple episodes. You'll love it. If you would like to be a part of the show, like JH, you can leave a review. Also, just open the Purple Podcast app on your iPhone or iPad and search for World's Toughest Podcast. Click our logo and then scroll down to write a review. If you don't have an Apple device, you can leave a review on Amazon. Just search Amazon for World's Toughest Podcast, click our logo, and then scroll down to write a customer review. And I will read it on a future episode. If you're a fan of the show, thank you for leaving a review. I appreciate it. It's kind of a deal, I know. Clicking around and menus, and then you got to come up with something nice to say. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you. Heather Bode is the host of the Overcome and Run podcast. Overcome and Run is the longest running OCR podcast not named ORM. And Heather is the only woman solo hosting her own show about OCR. You can find Overcome and Run on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. It's time to talk with Heather Bode. Let's go to the phones. Heather Bode, you ran 30 miles at Toughest Mudder West, finishing in 9th place for the women. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We're talking a few days after the race. How do you feel?
I'm pretty sore. Walking up and down stairs is a challenge, but I'm feeling good. I'm really happy that I made my goal. My hands are a little torn up. They are very sore. By the 6th lap, just the tip obstacle just tore them open. So my body's aching and hurting, but I'm really happy I made my goal.
You've run several Toughest Mudder races before NorCal, all at night. We both ran Toughest Mudder South this year at night. What did you think about starting the 8-hour race at 8 a.m.?
It was definitely different. It didn't feel as daunting as starting at night, because there's something about running at night where it just feels like it's this endless race of darkness. So starting at the beginning of the day when the sun's still kind of coming up, it was kind of exciting. I liked it more than I thought I did. And it's funny, my first 8-hour race was technically a BFX, which was Battle Frog's 8-hour race. And that was actually during the day. So it had been 2 years since I raced during the day. So it kind of felt cool to be facing this challenge in the daylight again.
You say it was less daunting. Do you mean like it was less intimidating? Like you thought like, hey, I can do this in the daytime, where like the nighttime kind of was scary maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like with the night, I mean, you're dealing with other challenges, and it just feels longer.
What were the biggest differences between running it during the day and at night?
I'd have to say definitely running without a wetsuit is really, really nice. It's nice to have that mobility back. And really, because there were so many water stations on course and everything, all I ran with were my clothes. I didn't run with like a hydration pack or anything. And so it kind of felt nice to have the freedom of movement with a lack of wetsuit. And definitely the weather. It was weird to run a race that was so dry. And I think a big part of that was the fact that it was during the day.
That was remarkably dry. Like we both run in Vegas before, but that was so dry and windy. It was like chapping you as you ran.
Oh yeah, it was painfully dry, like literally painful.
One of the
downsides of not having a wetsuit that I noticed was at Mud Mile. Tell me about Mud Mile.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. I should post a picture of what my legs look like right now because they are torn up. I mean, they get torn up at most Tough Mudder races I run, but it's just Mud Mile. They did a great job with it again in making the walls really high. So towards the end of it, I was able to get up and over by myself using like the corners, like most people do. But that mud just has so many little rocks and hard packed sections of dirt that it just bruises and scrapes up your legs. That by the end of the 8 hours, your legs are just destroyed. It's pretty bad.
Sometimes they say kiss of mud is like kiss of rocks. But that one, Mud Mile, felt like concrete mile.
It really did. It was rough. And when you're in the moment, you don't really notice. So, I mean, you notice a little bit. So every time I ran through, I was like, oh man, I'm going to be feeling this later. And then sure enough, when I finished and left and changed, I was like, oh my gosh, my legs are just absolutely destroyed.
What do you think the best part of having the race during the daytime was?
Honestly, I really liked being able to see the course. It helped me be able to run a little bit better because I wasn't kind of I'm a cautious runner. So if I can't see very well, like if I'm only lit by a headlamp in front of me, I'm not going to run at my full speed. And so the thing I liked the most was being able to see the trails and run at my full speed, and I was able to run comfortably. But another thing I really liked was having other people on the course. It was really nice and it was really motivating.
Okay, talk about that. We started our race at 8 o'clock. The regular Tough Mudder full half 5K people started at 9:30. So, and from 9:30 to 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock, we were sharing the course with them.
Yeah, I actually like that. I will say I was one of those people when they first announced the fact that Toughest Mudder West was going to be held during the day during a regular event. I was one of those people that was a little skeptical. I was like, oh man, there's going to be so much backup. It's going to get confusing. But it actually worked out really well. So Coach was at the start line, and I passed the start line once or twice when he was releasing a new wave. And I heard him kind of give them a little, the regular Tough Mudder runners, he would give them a speech and he would tell them about the toughest event. And he explained a little bit and told the regular Tough Mudders to just kind of make way for us if we were going through. And I found that was the case most of the time while I was running out there. Every time people saw my bib or the bibs of the toughest mudders around me, they would look back. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, make room for these guys," and they would get out of our way if they were. They would just kind of step aside. They would cheer us on, which was really, really awesome. It was really motivating, especially when you're in the middle of the race and your motivation is starting to slip and you're getting really tired, and just having Tough Mudders out on the course just cheer you on, even if they're complete strangers, is really encouraging. So all in all, I think it worked out really well and I really liked it.
They also had like special lanes for the Toughest Mudder racers set up, like not bypass lanes, but these lanes are at the obstacles are exclusive for people running Toughest Mudder. Yeah.
And that actually worked out well with almost all of the obstacles. It got a little messy at Mud Mile because all of the Tough Mudders were filling up the lanes that they had. So they started to kind of move over into our lanes. But again, when they, at least in my experience, when they moved over into our lane, they would still make way for the toughest competitors coming through. But at most of the obstacles they had those separate lanes. And I think it worked out well because a lot of Tough Mudder obstacles are so big that there's room to have those extra lanes. And so it didn't really get too mixed up from what I experienced.
You're right. The only obstacle I saw there was any slowdown from the regular people was Mud Mile. And I think that's because they had to do Mud Mile twice. So they were on that constantly. They were only on Berlin Walls like once, or only on Funky Monkey once. So they didn't have that overlap.
Yeah, exactly. So I was very pleasantly surprised. I will say I went in a little skeptical, but I was really pleasantly surprised with how it went.
What do you think the worst part of doing it during the day was?
I'd have to say just the it's hard to explain because, like I said, my first 8-hour event was during the day, and so when they announced that this was going to be during the day, a lot of people were like, "Oh man, it's not at night; it's going to be easy." I think running an 8-hour race in the day has its own challenge in that you're dealing with the sun. We were dealing with the wind and the dryness. And there's just something about the relentless, repetitive nature of going out lap after lap in the sun when it's just bearing down on you. There's no shade. Thankfully, it wasn't hot. But it's just sort of, I think the toughest part was just the having to have mental grit. I'm explaining this terribly, but I hope you know what I mean. Like just kind of forcing yourself to get back out there, even though it kind of felt endless.
Do you think there's any part of the toughest mudder during the daytime that correlates to World's Toughest?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked because I've seen some people on social media after this event, particularly people who didn't run it, saying, oh, the whole point of toughest mudder is to train for the hardest part of Worlds, which is the nighttime, which I will absolutely agree. Running at night is really difficult. But there is still so much training you can get out of an 8-hour toughest during the day because, yes, you're not dealing with the elements of night, but you're still you're still working on your endurance. You're still running for 8 hours. You're still, I think the biggest benefit you get out of it is just getting in that mental place to just go back out lap after lap after lap, especially when you feel like you want to quit and you're feeling sore. So even though it's during the day, it's so important to, if you have big goals for World's Toughest Mudder, to practice and get in that zone of not letting yourself surrender after 3 laps because you're just sick of running the same course over and over again.
You know what? That's a really good point. My first World's Toughest Mudder, I got stuck at an obstacle for like an hour and a half. It was you could not. There was no penalty option for that obstacle. And I was like, well, I can't go back out for another lap because I'll get stuck there again. And I had the same thought Sunday at Happy Ending. My hands got destroyed by the rope. I barely made it. Someone had to pull me up the rope. I was holding onto the rope. I couldn't make it up. Someone had to pull the rope up so I could get it to the top. I was like, I can't go out for another lap. What am I doing? But
oh, wow.
But when you get to the pit and you say, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen when I get to that obstacle. Whatever that obstacle is, I don't know what's going to happen when I get there. But I'm leaving the pit. I'm leaving anyway. Mm-hmm. You're right. It cuts a little mental groove that makes you a little bit stronger, a little bit grittier, and you'll be able to handle it a little bit better at World's Toughest.
Yes, absolutely. And working on that skill is so important, again, especially if you have a mileage goal, because the biggest piece of advice I got before World's Toughest was don't spend time in the pit. And that's the number one rule if you have any goal that you're trying to reach is don't get sucked into the pit. Just keep getting back out there. And so I think daytime toughest help with that kind of training just as much as nighttime toughest.
So if you had the power, if you could wave a magic wand for next year, 2019, would Toughest Mudder be at daytime or nighttime?
If I had my way, I would have both. I would add more toughest events and have half of them being during the day and half of them being at night because both of them have their merits.
Which one do you prefer? If you can only pick one, There's 2 Toughest Mudders next year right by your house, but you can only do one.
That is so difficult. I think I would do the nighttime one. It's not that I like it better, but it is definitely, in a lot of ways, more difficult. And so, and like so many people say, it is the hardest part of Worlds. And so the more practice you get through that kind of suffering, the better.
Tell me about the obstacles. There were 3 failable obstacles: Funky Monkey, Kong Infinity, and just the tip. How did you do on those?
I actually passed almost every single obstacle every lap. The only one I failed was just the tip, and that was on my 6th and final lap. Because as most people will tell you, your hands just started to get really shredded after a while, particularly on just the tip because of that wood traverse at the beginning. And the weather was so dry and windy and mud, and the mud was drying on your skin and cracking it even more. And so by the time I got to just the tip for my 6th lap, I started going across it. I fell. I tried it again, and then I fell. And then I just knew at that point, my hands just had enough. Plus, they started bleeding profusely. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to take the penalty lap. So thankfully, that was the only penalty lap I did. But outside of that, I passed all the rest of the obstacles, which was really awesome.
You mentioned going back to retry just the tip. Eli said two things at the briefing, the pre-race briefing, that I'd never heard before. One is that if you fail an obstacle, you can go back and try it as many times as you want, which may have been the rule, but I've never heard it explained or at least spoken. And then the second thing is that there was no sprint lap this weekend. It was It was from go. You're doing every single obstacle. What did you think of that?
That was interesting. At first, obviously, when he said it, I was like, no. I was really counting on that sprint lap. But I really in retrospect, I really like that he did that for the daytime toughest. Because again, I think the nighttime toughest is more difficult in a lot of different ways. So this was another element that they added to make the daytime toughest even more difficult. And in my brain, more difficult means more training. So in retrospect, I'm glad that we didn't have a sprint lap, that we just sort of dove right into it. And it really made me hustle. I didn't feel like I could relax at any point, which I really liked because I had a goal to reach. And so I like that out of the gates, it's like, okay, here we go. We got to press hard from the beginning. So I liked it.
Do you have any other good obstacle stories from the weekend? How was Arctic Enema?
Arctic Enema was surprising. So the first lap, it actually wasn't even that bad. Well, they had just started pouring ice, but the water was a little low. And so you didn't have to completely submerge. And then there were some laps where the water level was a little higher, so I had to submerge a little bit more, and I did get a brain freeze once. But out of all the Tough Mudder events that I've run, this event's Arctic Enema was not that bad. I was very pleasantly surprised.
You know what was weird about Arctic Enema? We were in and out of the water several times, especially if you fell on Funky Monkey. But there were parts of the race where you'd be super hot and dry, and then you'd get wet, and the wind would blow on you, and then you'd be wet and cold, and you'd go back and forth from minute to minute almost.
Oh yeah, no, it was crazy. I'm a person who overheats when I run very easily. I did not overheat once. At my warmest, I was like kind of warm. I was never really sweating. The constant wind and the slightly kind of average temperature just kind of kept you cool, which was kind of nice, except for the whole super, super dry air thing.
Tell me about the weather. What do you think about the weather? I don't know if it's really a daytime thing or a Sonoma, California thing, but what do you think of the weather?
Yeah, I don't know either. The weather alone is what made this race, not alone, but the weather is one of the factors that made this race really challenging for me, because even though I was constantly hydrating and every pit stop I would drink water, I almost the entire time felt parched. My mouth just felt sticky and dry, and as soon as the mud would dry from obstacles like Mud Mile, Kiss of Mud, it would dry and harden. And so anytime I extended my arms, my skin would feel too tight. It was painful. So for a lot of this race, because of the weather, I was just in pain. And so to give a better answer to an earlier question, I think that's probably an element that you wouldn't find in a nighttime toughest that makes this daytime toughest difficult, is that the weather is entirely different and you're facing these issues like really dry skin that you wouldn't face if you're running at night in a wetsuit.
And plus that wind, I don't think it ever stopped the whole time. It was just blowing and blowing.
Oh my gosh, it was so funny. 6 hours in, I was just saying to myself at one point during the lap, I was like, I'm so over windy races. I'm so over wind, because just last week I was at the Spartan World Championships in Tahoe. It was super windy there too. And I'm just and so on Sunday I was like, I'm over this. I'm over the wind. I hate it.
What did you think about the terrain of the course?
Interesting. It's one of those courses that is unsuspecting. So you look at the elevation profile and you're like, okay, rolling hills, not crazy climbs, no super long climbs. nothing super muddy. But it's just it was the relentlessness of this course. It was the constant up and down and up and down. That's really what got to you over several hours. Like if you were only doing one lap of it, it's like, okay, you can deal with it. But doing that over and over again, even though just looking at the data and the figures, you're like, it's not that bad. But actually running it for 8 hours, it was challenging.
There was no flat ground. It was up or down.
Yeah, constantly. And so it's just it just really wore out your legs really well.
Your goal going into the race was 30 miles. You've never run 30 miles in 8 hours before. What was going through your head when you crossed the finish line after running 30 miles?
I couldn't believe that I had done it. It blew my mind. I gave my pit crew hugs. I gave a bunch of people hugs, and I just took a minute for myself and just got a little emotional because 2 years ago, I had my first race and I got 15 miles and I felt like I was going to die half the race. And with this race, I finished 30 miles and I still had about 15 to 20 minutes to spare. And it blew my mind that I could even possibly do it. So it was very surreal and really, really emotional and awesome.
Yeah, there's something sweet about working so hard for something and wanting it so bad and then finally getting it. Yeah,
definitely. Because especially when you have those moments through the race where at least I have these moments where I sort of berate myself for being stupid, which I know I'm not. I know I wasn't being stupid, but I have these moments where I'm really, really low and I'm like, you're so dumb. Why did you set this goal? It was really unrealistic. Like, you can't do this. I kind of had that moment around the fourth lap. But then when you push through that, and then when you actually finish after having that moment, it's really, really, it's a really cool feeling.
How do you get through that? What do you tell yourself mentally to push through
that? For me, I sort of just have to shut it off. I almost don't even tell myself anything. The only thing I have in my brain is just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward and then try to take like little bite-sized sections. So with my fourth lap, I think that was probably my slowest lap. I would take little sections. I'm like, okay, I can run this far. I'm going to run this far. Okay. So I would kind of block out the negative thoughts and just be like, okay, just run this. And if I could run that, I'd be like, okay, then I can keep going. And so it all boiled down to just keep moving forward.
Do you ever get that thought that, well, if I stop after this lap, then I've already had a good race. It's been a good day anyway.
It's so funny. I ran into somebody on course. He and I were pacing back and forth for a while, and I ran into him on my fourth lap, and that's when I hit the wall. That's when I was in pain. I was tired. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. This goal is unrealistic. And he asked me how I was. I was like, I am not doing good, man. I don't know if I can do that. And he was being really encouraging and sweet. And he was like, you know what? Even if you can't get that, you're definitely going to get 25. And that's a really, really good job. And something, when he said that in my brain, I was like, no, I'm going to get 30. Like, nothing against him. I know he was being encouraging and wonderful, but something about him saying that sort of clicked. It's like, no, I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to settle for 25. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to push harder, and I'm going to get my 30 miles. And then so for lap 5 and 6, I actually kind of stayed pretty steady. For lap 5, I had a negative split, and it was really exciting. I sort of got the fire lit back under me.
Yeah, you have to tell yourself, I didn't come here to have a good race. I came here to get 30 miles.
Yeah, I really wanted this goal.
After you ran the race, you were able to interview several of the elites for your OCR podcast, Overcome and Run. What did they tell you, or what did you think about the elite race at Toughest NorCal?
I found it was really interesting. It was really fun to talk to them. A lot of them talked about how different it was to run during the day. And a lot of them were, even though they're all incredible athletes, they were also very challenged by this course, just that constant up and down, those rolling hills. And so it was really good to talk to them. So I'll be probably putting out my episode tomorrow. So I would tell you exactly what they said, but honestly, I was really tired when I interviewed them. So I don't 100% remember everything they said. I was a little exhausted.
You also got a chance to talk with the Toughest Mudder race director, Eli Hutchison, from TMHQ. TMHQ tends to be pretty tight-lipped, but I understand you got him to answer a few questions, though.
I did, yeah. He didn't give me strict answers on most things because, of course, TMHQ wants to unveil that stuff on their own time. But I did, I asked him why they're dropping the half for next year and why they're keeping the 5K. I asked him why they went to 8 to 10 miles for next year as opposed to 10 to 12. He gave me a good answer for that. And so I asked him a lot about the 2019 changes. And I actually was able to get some good stuff from him.
2018 has been kind of a weird year. We've talked about it on the podcast. What are your thoughts for 2019 for Tough Mudder?
I'm really, really hopeful because I love Tough Mudder. It's the first OCR I ever ran. It's the OCR that made me fall in love with OCR. And so when all these changes for 2018 were being announced, I was really unhappy. I will very freely admit I was not a fan. I wasn't a huge fan of the 2-loop system. I wasn't a huge fan of the other changes they were making. I was getting really sad with Tough Mudder. And so these announcements with 2019 have made me so happy. They've kind of renewed my faith in Tough Mudder. And I'm really excited. I think that if they can stick with all this stuff, I think they're going to have a great year next year.
Some of those things you're talking about are getting rid of the 2 loops, going back to an 8 to 10 mile course.
Yeah.
New obstacle, 10 new obstacles or innovative obstacles they've talked about as opposed to 1 or 2 they had this year.
Yeah, and I think one of the most exciting things for me is the different difficulty lanes, because I really liked when they used to have that, they would have like Legionnaire lanes for slightly more difficult versions of obstacles. And for me, I really like the fun obstacles, but as I've kind of been increasing my training and all this stuff, I still like to have a little bit of a challenge. And so I think it's really exciting that they're going to introduce, from what it sounds like, they're going to introduce a little bit more of a challenge into certain obstacles. And I think that's exciting for other athletes too. I think if they make a few more challenging changes to certain obstacles, I think they'll draw in more athletes who haven't done Tough Mudder before, more kind of competitive athletes from the OCR world. So I think that could be really exciting.
I think it's great. I'm looking forward to next year.
Yeah, me too.
How can people find those interviews we just talked about?
Well, I will be, as I said, I'll be putting out the episode tomorrow. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's Overcome and Run. And I also put it on the website, www.overcomeandrun.com. You can find us on Facebook, Overcome and Run, and Instagram at Overcome and Run. And I usually post the link to the episode at all those places. So,
Heather, any last thoughts on Toughest Mudder West?
That was a really, really great race. I thought it was extremely well executed by TMHQ. And I'm really proud of everybody that went out there and ran that race. No matter what your goal was, finishing that race was a really big accomplishment.
Heather Bode, thanks much.
Thanks so much.
Special thanks to Heather Bode for appearing in this episode. Well done, Heather. Be sure to check her out on Overcome and Run. Don't forget, if you would like to be on the world's toughest social media team, shoot me an email, willhicks@gmail.com. And if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. I would appreciate it. I will talk with you soon. Go spend time with someone you love.